All right, so welcome back to Quantum Discovery Day at the Wave at the City of Calgary. Very excited to have a special panel with me today of all of... Oh, yes, sorry, sit on the couch. Hey, Dave. So we have a number of people who are very active in the quantum ecosystem here in Calgary. And Calgary has been known as being somewhat of a tech hub, and Alberta as being known, and we're on the map for tech now. And so here with me today, we have some of these experts that are prominent in the quantum industry for various roles that they play. And we're going to take some time to get to know them. So I'm going to ask a question. And before you answer, if you could please introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your background, as well as your organization and the role that they play in the ecosystem, I think that would go very well. So can you each explain briefly what quantum technology is and why it's considered a game changer? How about we just pass the microphone down? Sorry, Dave.
Just full disclosure, I'm the last addition to this panel. So my name is David Yiptong. I'm with Quantum City, but I also work with QAI Ventures. QAI Ventures is a quantum ecosystem builder based out of Switzerland. They also have a bit of a VC arm, so they can actually invest in early stage companies. We have an accelerator program that's coming to the Quantum City facilities in March. So if you know any companies or entrepreneurs, applications are open. As far as what is quantum technology, looking at who's down the line, I'll let them actually talk about it because I am not qualified for this. But in terms of how it's game changing, I think it's I was just talking to Brent in the crowd here about how technology changes how we do things from a business perspective, but even socially, right? And we'll see the effects of that social experiment in a couple of weeks with our neighbors down south. So. Quantum's going to be a big game changer because it's one of those things. It's kind of like I was talking to Brent about the CBC posted this really old piece about the advent of cellular in 1980. And in 1980, people had no idea what cellular was going to do. And if you think about how dependent we are on that right now, 40 years later, we can't live without it. But they were talking about then about how they had no idea what the business model was going to be for this, but it was coming. So similarly, we're at 1980 now for quantum. 40 years from now, we'll be sitting here going, do you remember when we didn't know this was going to happen? So I think that's why it's a big deal. But this guy next to me can tell you what quantum is.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your trust. I'm Daniel Oblak, associate prof, the University of Calgary, which is a post-secondary. Oh, you guys know that. What is quantum tech? I guess I'll take it from the other point. So you said what it can do, right? So I think even within this community, there's a bit of a discussion about what is quantum. When you inject $350 million from the federal government into a field, it looks like just about everything is quantum, just like everything is AI these days. So, it's actually a bit of a controversial question in some sense. But if I were to say what is quantum, what really is quantum technology, it's when you use very unique quantum mechanical properties of systems to do something that could not be done without those quantum mechanical properties. So, the superpositions as we saw it, the single quantum system level ideas or entanglement, those are sort of the hallmarks of what is quantum. In some recent applications from the National Research Council, there's actually a scale of quantumness where you can put your application in as how quantum is it. And if you use entanglement in your proposal, then it's the highest level of quantum. We're getting there with the very specifics. So I'll hand over the mic now.
Cool. Yeah. I'm Adam. I'm a scientist in residence at Quantum City. So my job is sort of an interesting mix of research and industry outreach, industry engagement. So Quantum City is really trying to reach out to the non-quantum industry and get them excited about quantum, interested in quantum, and to bring projects from them back to academia or to quantum solutions providers to execute and to really build an ecosystem surrounding quantum. And the question, what is quantum technology? What's exciting about it? I think Daniel said, almost exactly what I was going to say, which is a good sign. But I'll just add, the excitement, and this is me speaking as a scientist, really comes from the fact that quantum technology is about the chance to do things that are impossible classically, impossible any other way. So there's a, I think about algorithms and computer science a lot. There's problems that we can only solve with a quantum computer. The only way to answer this question is to build a quantum computer and then run the problem on it. And so for me, the excitement really comes down to the fact that we're trying to do things that would otherwise be impossible. And that's what motivates me.
Thank you, Adam. Hi, everyone, again. I'm Dr. Katanya Kuntz. I'm a research associate at the University of Waterloo. So Daniel mentioned during his talk the KeySat mission. I have a role there. But here I'm representing Cubo Consulting, and I'm the co-founder and CEO. With Cubo Consulting, we are trainers and translators and consultants on what is quantum tech. I use my background of experimental quantum optics, and AJ uses his background of education and business to translate these technologies to literally anyone. And why I think quantum tech, or what it is, and why I'm excited, it's like I said, quantum 2.0, it's the addressing of individual particles, individual atoms. So now we're using particles of light, photons, things like this to do the technology. And so it's beyond what our current classical technology does. And it's very exciting, especially from what we've already heard. There are problems that are just impossible to do classically. And when we use a quantum system, they now become possible. Oba?
I'm sure I can top that. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Oba Harding. I manage an innovation ecosystems group with Prairies Economic Development Canada, or Prairies Can, as we're known for short. My background, I think, is a little bit relevant here. I come from a scientific background. I was a biologist. I worked in reproductive medicine and fertility. After that, I worked in research and development funding for quite some time, and that led me to my current role with Prairies Can. At its core, we're an economic development agency. We are responsible for promoting and developing the growth of the economy in the Prairies provinces in Canada. And that's a good preamble to why we are interested in quantum technologies. Big investors and supportive of the quantum ecosystem and Quantum City. What is quantum? This is a fun question. I was talking to my 10-year-old last night. And I thought, if I can nail it here, I may have a chance tomorrow. I guess my explanation of quantum is a fundamental technology based on the quantum mechanics and physics that, without diving too much into the science, allows us to do things and explore questions and equations and problems in a way that is much faster and allows us to address complexity in a way that we couldn't even conceive of previously. I know that's very high level, but that's probably the easiest way that I can leave it at. But then the biologist in me thinks, or sorry, actually before I jump to that, I'll say the economic developer in me thinks the quantum technologies are very interesting and captivating of the mind, but really what we're thinking about is the applications. As an economic developer, I want to know how companies, big and small, can take advantage. How can we save money? How can we save lives? How can we save time? And I don't know about you, but I feel like our world is getting increasingly complex. So there's no shortage of complex problems. And to have tools with which to rely upon to address them gives us a framework to move forward. We can't just be stuck. Climate issues, the ability to sense and even be aware of phenomena and matter around us, those problems don't go away. So quantum will give us a framework with which to understand these things to an extent and then address them. We'll get into applications later, but then I was going to say the biologist in me always thinks of where we're going in terms of healthcare and personalized medicine. you may have a genetic disease or disorder that's attacking you and your DNA in a very specific way. Quantum tools and how we can approach that with drug discovery and how that will interact with your DNA and your molecules or someone that you love in your family, friends, or particular circle, those are powerful tools that allow us to move forward and make progress towards those. So I'll cut it off there.
Thanks, Oba. Hi, everyone. My name is David Basto. I'm with the City of Calgary. So I've been working with the City of Calgary for close to 30 years now in the IT department. So I have a lot of experience coming up with solutions for different business units in the city, mainly around their networks, but also trying to anticipate some of the technologies that are coming down the pipe and learning to adapt to those technologies. So what is quantum for me? Quantum for me is a disruptive technology, a disruptive emerging technology that can be consequential for the City of Calgary. And we want to look at the risks that quantum can present, but also the risks of not doing and preparing for the emergence of quantum in our society. You know, I look at, I'm hearing a lot of the experts talk about quantum and saying that, our classical perspective of quantum isn't quite right, and that we built our cities based on that perspective. And how would we build our cities in the future if we really understood what quantum was about? Would we build it differently? So those are a lot of the questions that we need to answer. And we need to answer, how do we start the journey of understanding quantum? What does that education look like? Because we do have a gap in education in understanding the need to look at quantum and the path to move forward with quantum. So I'm really excited about quantum. I think especially the risks in terms of encryption, I would like to see the City of Calgary be very prepared for that day when quantum computers become commercialized and we can still secure our data. Yeah.
All right. Excellent answers from all of the panelists. Thank you all very much. I heard making the impossible possible. I heard disruption. I heard utilizing special properties that exist on that scale that don't exist in the real world, in the regular macro world. Excellent answers. So I should introduce myself maybe a little bit. I'm AJ Sikora, co-founder and chief learning officer of Cubo Consulting Corp. Catania is my partner. And so my background is in business as well as education. And so I'm a communications expert. And so I'm really, really good at translating difficult, dense topics into regular English that everybody can understand. So let's move on to our next question. So next question, you know what, Dave? I'm going to take it easy on you. We're going to start at the other side this time. So how close are we? This is perfect for you, Dave. How close are we to seeing practical, everyday applications of quantum technologies in municipal services, such as water management, transit, and corporate security?
Well, actually, what I'm learning from you guys is that there is some deployments in municipalities already for optimization. So that's really important because I think the City of Calgary or other municipalities as well offer a wealth of use cases where this technology can be tested and evolve. And Calgary has a lot of optimization opportunities in all the different business units, from water, transit, roads, traffic management, even IT, right? So, yeah, lots of opportunity.
Excellent. And would we like to continue on? This question is for all of the panelists, I was thinking.
Sure. Oh, well, we can pass it back then, but I'll jump on this really quickly and say, I'm excited to hear the enthusiasm. I'm excited about quantum and what quantum can do. And an important part of the story that I'll say now, because I try and say it whenever I get the chance to, is that the path to finding a quantum advantage it has to be a back and forth between the use case, between the industry, between the quantum solutions providers, and also a feedback as the quantum technology itself gets better. So, how close are we? Close, but that doesn't mean that the first thing we try is going to look impressive or look exciting. It's really about starting the process by trying something, seeing what happens, and then iterating from there to sort of converge to an exciting use of quantum. So now is the right time to start, is sort of my feeling.
I totally agree with you on that one, Adam. Who'd like to follow?
Sure. I would just add that there are some municipalities that are engaged in quantum technologies around the world. So like earlier, I presented a use case from Japan. Japan has been a part of quantum technologies for a decade or more. And so there's also in Chicago, for example, and New York, there are fiber optic networks that are already established, and they are working on entanglement distribution. So we heard from Daniel that if you want to make a quantum network, you need to distribute what's called entanglement. And so all of these infrastructures are being created not just for public citizens, but also governments, embassies. Because often, for example, military, police, RCMP, they may need to communicate encrypted, and our current encryption methods are vulnerable to hacking. As you've seen in the news, especially over the last 5-10 years, there's more and more AI-driven hacks, and they are very good. So, and with the quantum side of encryption, it is theoretically secure. So yes, your physical implementation might have some vulnerabilities. That's why I'm an experimentalist, and I help you figure out what those are. But theoretically, if you can do it correctly in real life, it should be secure. And so I'm really interested in incorporating that, that security into the IT.
Excellent. Anybody else like to weigh in? I've got more questions. Let's do more questions. Okay, so this one's on funding. It's not specifically to you, Oba. Anybody can answer this. What types of funding and support are available for businesses and municipalities looking to invest in quantum technologies?
Yeah, so I wouldn't couch this as exclusively quantum funding, but really I think what we're talking about is innovation funding. It's particularly relevant here, and kind of looking up hotbeds of where we are seeing quantum activity, it tends to occur in cities or regions where we have high degrees of innovation, particularly in links to post-secondaries, but also where we see high degrees of entrepreneurship. And all of us here in the city of Calgary, I think we're seeing a lot of that. The funding, in this case, we're talking about largely public funding from government sources, but private investment is a key piece of that as well. One tends to catalyze the other. So the innovation funding, we've got a bunch of sources. So I said that Prairies Can, we are, of course, one option for that. We do innovation ecosystem funding. The way that I often describe it is there's kind of two ways that we can support that. One is direct to companies. We can always invest in companies, and we do. But that funding is competitive. Often it's scarce. We also invest in companies indirectly through ecosystem programming, things like accelerators, incubators. There are industry associations, or I'd say partnerships with post-secondaries. That is a huge source of funding. There is I was going to say NSERC, or National Science and Engineering Research Council, NSERC. NSERC is providing significant amount of funding through some of their platform programs through partnerships between companies and post-secondaries. That's not exclusive to any one post-secondary. It's available across the board. There's an organization called MyTax, who is best known for their collaborative internship programs. MyTax alone is providing $40 million in quantum-related funding for partnerships across Canada. The National Research Council, I think it was mentioned previously, NRC is also providing a significant pot of funding. There's a key message, though, I would encourage everyone to take away, though. Quantum is an incredibly complex and rich area. I don't think this is the kind of thing as companies, big or small, that you dabble in. I think the pathway here is through a post-secondary partnership. Why ignore the resources that are in front of us? And that's why I think we see such heavy funding through the post-secondaries. There's an opportunity there, not just to access the funds and the outcomes, but to build prolonged partnerships, have those discussions, tap into research and development, tap into expertise. It's kind of a shared objective. So a lot of funding sources through post-secondaries, but then again, from the innovation objective, when you come at it from that slant, I think what you'll see through the NRCs and some of the federal departments is it's really kind of sector focused. So we really have to kind of understand what are our use cases, whether that's quantum computing or whether that's an IT related or part of a larger digital transformation that we're all undergoing. But then we see a lot of applications in sensing. We have kind of remote sensing companies. I've seen applications with respect to methane or remote gas sensing, but we can also use this sensing for water within municipalities and other aspects. So there's a lot of different ways you can go, but I'll stop there.
And I'll follow that up with David from QAI Ventures. So how is QAI Ventures supporting the ecosystem, because they're involved in funding as well as part of the accelerator?
Yeah, QAI Ventures actually will invest in early stage quantum startups. The key is that they're looking for startups that are not just doing research, but that are trying to look at some sort of adoption path. And I think that goes back to like what Oba was saying and what Adam was saying about how you really need to have a problem that you're solving, and there needs to be this feedback loop with industry. So yeah, the QAI Ventures team is there. They're actually backed by a family office out of Europe. And this family office has basically decided to invest in quantum because they feel it will be highly impactful on humanity going forward because it's so foundational.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So next question I'm going to ask is for everybody, and I'm going to ask about cryptography now. I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. So how can quantum cryptography enhance corporate security measures, and what should businesses be doing now to prepare?
Well, it landed with me, so I'll take this one. Yeah, so that was a lot of questions in one. What can quantum cryptography do? Well, quantum cryptography can secure what you're used to doing right now when the floodgates open, sort of, for quantum computing. So, you know, it's always hard to sell or prepare or argue for a risk, but it is a risk. You know, we don't know exactly when quantum computers are going to come around fully, nor exactly when they grow to the scale that they will threaten quantum cryptography, standard cryptography, but you know, it's going to happen. And then we have certain solutions that don't rely on quantum mechanics, which are the post-quantum cryptography, funnily named that. But there's still other harder mathematical problems. And then we have the quantum cryptography option. And I think, you know, the right now we're finding ways to solve the issues with cryptographic backdoors or hacks by patching up. But what we're talking about, the potential happening, is that everything just becomes erased that we can do currently now. It's not just a small patch, it's like the whole thing, the whole wall breaks down. And then we have a real problem. And with that is what quantum cryptography, I think, is the final solution for that. There can be many steps on the way that go through some harder mathematical problems. But eventually it is sort of the ultimate goal. What was the other part of the question? Or was there some more there?
It was, how can businesses start preparing now?
Right, and I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. So I'm not a cryptographer or worked in security like that for any amount of years, but people who have a lot of experience within the business explain to me how long it takes to change over cryptographic standards, even though you're just changing, you know, mathematical problems or computational parts. And we're talking about not 1 or 2 years, we're like 20, 30 years in some cases. So imagine now that quantum cryptography is where you want to go, and you need to have some changes to your hardware. You need to have some changes to your network stack. It's too late to even start now. I mean, but well, it's better late than never, I guess, right? So in that sense, it's important, right, to not just be complacent and wait for, for the quantum computers to be around in that scale, because once they are, then it's too late to solve the problem.
Just going to add one tiny comment onto that, which is that, not only is it too late to wait until the quantum computers are here, even before they get here, you should be worried, because there's this notion of a store now, decrypt later attack. So it depends how paranoid you are, but data you send on the internet right now that is encrypted, someone could be storing, waiting for a quantum computer to come along so that they can then decrypt this information and see it. So, if it's just me sending a message to my friend, I probably don't have to worry, but if you're sending something very sensitive, very secret, you should think about this. If you're sending the formula for Coca-Cola, probably measure now, decrypt later is a worry, or store now, decrypt later.
And I'll just add, in addition to quantum key distribution, there's also quantum random number generators. So I'm aware of use cases with the energy grid where they are incorporating QRNGs into the security system right now. So this is a commercialized device. These have been around, some of them have been around for 20 years, depending on what it is. And they can give you these random seeds that you can then incorporate into your encryption. So even though you don't have quantum key distribution, you could have some of that security from quantum in your current classical cryptography. And that might be a nice transition, because then you don't have to transition everything, you just transition your seed.
As mentioned before, I play in the innovation space and I work with a wide variety of companies. Our team touches a number of sectors. We often talk about the digital transformation that's underway, and there's a lot of talk and of course excitement about AI in the last year and a half or 2 years. While I respect that, again, these aren't the kind of areas that you dabble in. We have companies that are venturing online in our country that are relatively uneducated about what they're dealing with, and if nothing else, the intellectual property, where they're selling the formula to Coca-Cola or everything else. You're talking about the secret sauces of your business, whether that's a business model or productization or so many other aspects. When someone wants to do a PhD, it's not the kind of endeavor that gets done in a couple of months or even a couple of years, and there's precursor degrees to this. My advice to companies is an awareness and education to dive in, if only for their own self-preservation. We've seen and experienced some of this conversation around cybersecurity. Quantum aside, are you even cyber ready? Do you know the degree of threat that you are under? And often the answer is no. And there is a cost to that, and I think in many cases, we often play the defense game. Well, it's not a problem today. It's almost like an insurance. We'll deal with it tomorrow. So I'd argue that the best time to start is yesterday, little cliche, but the second best time to start today. I don't think it begins with quantum, depending on where you're starting from. I think it's just an awareness of where you are in terms of your cyber presence, access to your assets, to your clients' assets. And it's not always a matter of cost, but it's kind of that thinking of that adage of what's the cost of inaction. And so I think this is kind of a longer term plan, and it's one more resource. I can appreciate that on the size of your enterprise or whatnot, but the risks are huge. I mean, in layman's terms, as I understand it, as quantum cryptography comes online, it will render our current systems obsolete. I mean, like overnight, whoever has that has access to essentially take down governments, companies, and I don't think I'm overstating that. I don't say that to be a fear monger. Yes, yeah, quantum computers. And so what we see in our world is this is being very heavily funded at the level of the state. China is outspending us by factors, by billions, really by billions. And so the concern isn't just for any one entity or any one country. I don't think us as a nation can do this alone. We have to have allies. We have to share research, understanding how municipal assets operate, if only for continuity of operations. There are some real threats here. So how do we start? I think it starts with cybersecurity and knowing that risk, but then how do we get to a place where quantum applications and those computing aspects get there? That can be, we can get there over time, but I don't think it begins there.
Yeah, very well said, Ova. Yeah, I would agree that cybersecurity is probably our biggest concern. Just like you were saying, Oba, it could be very quick onto us, and but there is that education process, and then there's the city can offer use cases to gain an understanding of how this technology evolves. So yeah, I think that if we can provide those use cases, we don't have to necessarily put a lot of actual funding, like cash, into this system. We can offer things like our assets and our use cases into the ecosystem to develop the technology. For instance, like our fiber optics. It doesn't cost us anything to give Daniel access to our fiber optics so he can, do his experiments. Similar, we can give them access to, let's say, the center to experiment with synthetic data, to create simulations that can test cryptography, right? So it doesn't have to be necessarily cash that's funding. It can be the opportunity and use cases that we can provide as well.
I just want to make a note about adoption and industrial adoption. I think industry and cities are really important in the early adoption of major technologies. When you look at historically, all major technologies are adopted by either governments or large industry because they have the capital. They can also amortize it over time. It's a different, But what's really important, and I think to what Oba was saying, when there's a new kind of trend, and when there's a new trend approaching us, to spur urgency, there's the use of fear. And I think we've seen this with clean tech and environmental initiatives. There's this fear that's used to spur urgency. But that's not really sticky. That will wax and wane. But if we look at it from a growth perspective, and I think in any city department, I think the big message is that it doesn't matter what department you're in what company you work for, the next time you're doing a project, always think about, are you future-proofing it? I think Greg Hart talked about being future fit on Friday as individuals, but as organizations, how are we future fit? How are you thinking, okay, here's what we need to do, but then how do we future-proof this further down the road? Are there small things we can do now? Because I think then that takes the intimidation factor out of, oh, is it quantum? Do I have to put quantum in here? It's more like, I've got a problem to solve. I'm going to solve this problem today, but then if I'm going to solve it, what can I do to actually lay the groundwork for something down the road as well? No fear.
Excellent. Yes, and I'd like to follow up on that from an educational perspective. If you put a learner into a triggered state with, for example, too much fear, they shut down. They cannot absorb any more information, and therefore whatever education or whatever you're trying to sell, they're not going to hear it. So I don't disagree with using fear, but there is definitely a line of, hey, you crossed it and now the learner shut down. So thanks for mentioning that. I have an exciting question for you. We've got the city of Calgary. We've got some municipal services in the audience here. So what is the most exciting technology from your perspective that you would pitch to municipal services here at the City of Calgary WAVE?
I hate traffic. So And in our neighborhood, there are these lights that are never timed properly, no matter what time of day you go through. And I'm sure this exists in every city, but this is a perfect optimization problem, right? So I would really love to try to help the city of Calgary improve your commute by quantum optimization. I'm just assuming you're going to say.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I was also going to talk about optimization. Same message, but a slightly different story, which is that, as a scientist or from a scientific background, I don't want to make promises. I want to focus on areas where I don't know what's going to happen. So I don't know how good a quantum computer is going to, if a quantum computer is going to be useful for optimizing traffic lights. But I would love to find out. And I would love to be involved in a project with the city in terms of finding out. And if it isn't, I'd love to be involved in the next optimization problem until we find one that works. So yeah, also optimization, but because of the uncertainty for me.
Daniel, you've got a comment. I know you do.
Do I? Oh, well, I mean, now the question is, should I stick with my own research or should I venture into something else? Well, let's stick with something I know something about. So, I think, okay, and I shouldn't use fear. Oh, gosh. I know.
Just a little bit of fear is okay.
A little bit of fear, okay. I've been approved. So, I think safeguarding the all of the data that's being transmitted through to control all the utilities and the facilities of the city, from water to traffic to intersectional traffic lights, transit, implementing a system that's based on an existing infrastructure that the city has, to select. Now, I would want to hear from the city, what is the first, the most crucial piece of infrastructure that you'd want to take care of first, and then deploying it to that one and showing that, now you don't have to worry about that one for a number of years, and then let's see how that works.
It's okay. You don't have to pitch, David. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so looking into the future now, let's say, 20, 30, 50 years, what timeline do you foresee for quantum technologies to become mainstream, and what steps do municipalities or municipal services need to start taking now to get there?
I'm just going to quickly say, think about, when I joined Quantum City and QAI Ventures, I talked to Adam, and I asked Adam, where are we, if you were to describe regular computing, where are we in that timeline? And I think we were talking about being late 1940s, early 1950s. We just came out of the Enigma machine, a mechanical computer. Computers are really, you have to be specialized. They only do one thing really well. They add really well. They don't do anything else really well. And they're very hard to use. That's 1940, 1950. And we're looking at it here from 2024, and we're looking at computing now. So that's that time frame. Think about wireless, right? Or think about internet, the time it evolved. The internet started in the 90s publicly, and it took till about, 2010, 2005 for it to become mainstream and usable. And now we can't live without it. So you can see the timelines are compressing. So when you ask where, in 40 years, this whole adoption is going to accelerate. So it'll likely be shorter than the sort of e-commerce and mobile adoption, and definitely not as long as standard computing, right? So it's close, but again, not to enact fear, but I think we could be sitting here in 20 or 30 years thinking back to, hey, do you remember the early 2020s?
Yeah, sure. I'll give a date, which is a bold thing to do, but I'll say if you look at the quantum, so to give some background, quantum computers, like David said, are not great, and they're getting better, but they aren't. We have a vision of what they could be, a sort of theoretical vision of what a perfect quantum computer would look like, and we aren't there yet. And if you look at the timeline that's put out by a lot of sort of leading hardware companies trying to build a quantum computer, they're all converging sort of around the date 2030 as the year when they're promising that we will have a universal fault-tolerant quantum computer. But think of this as this is the dream. This is what we've been trying to build for a while. So you can pin that dates to your mind, and if nothing happens by then, maybe the hardware companies were wrong. This is possible. But another piece of the pie is that I think lots of academics would say, if you ask them, well, say I handed you a universal fault-tolerant quantum computer right now, what would you use it for? They would say they don't know. We have ideas, we have thoughts, but it's really hard, really, really hard to know exactly what you're going to use this machine for before it's even built and before you have it to play with. So we've got to build the machine, but we've also got to try as hard as we can to have this back and forth to be ready for the machine when it's here in our hands. And that's sort of the exciting thing about the next 5 years for me. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, let me point this out. Is that now, if you're involved, now is a great time to be involved because you get to guide what these machines get used for. You've got a really outsized impact on the development of these machines, on the strategizing around these machines, the earlier you get in. So yeah, I mean, if you want to use them for good, now's the time to push for that, and I assume we all do. But
I just want to jump in. I totally agree with you, Adam. If there's a quantum computer that has X, Y, and Z applications, if you want Z to happen, you got to start adopting now, because otherwise they're going to make X and Y and you're going to miss out.
And if X and Y have a lot more money than you do, you can't wait,
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so to continue on what Adam said, I have an analogy for a quantum computer and where we're at and how we don't actually have one right now to play with, right? So as Adam said, we don't have a fault-tolerant universal quantum computer. That's the holy grail. We do have quantum systems that you can do computations on, and those exist now. So we do have some systems, but we don't have the holy grail. The holy grail is the thing that's going to possibly break public key encryption. That's the RSA encryption that you use for your online banking and all those protocols, right? So there are some encryptions that cannot be broken, classical encryptions that cannot necessarily be vulnerable to a quantum computer. It's just that one in particular, the public key encryption. That one in particular is vulnerable to a fault-tolerant quantum computer. But right now, we don't have any of these machines to play with. So it's kind of like you're trying to teach yourself how to drive a car and you're learning on a tricycle. So you understand motion and braking and turning, but you have no idea about an engine and all the other things that go into a car, right? And so with our systems right now, it's really hard to predict in 40 years what is a quantum computer going to be able to do. But I will make this prediction. A quantum computer is not better at everything, and quantum sensors are not better at everything. There are some classical technologies that will probably still maintain into the future. It's just the really hard problems that we want to outsource to the quantum systems.
I'll add something quick in that it's been touched upon from a few different angles about the role of municipalities in terms of this technology adoption, but also creating the conditions for companies to know that they can take advantage. I think that sends a real strong market signal to our companies that there is adoption around the corner, that innovation isn't just buzzwords or, oh, this is a really fascinating technology, but that's for someone else. No. There's a huge conversation playing out within the government of Canada about productivity. We have an aging population. Our GDP isn't as high as it once was, so our population is running down. And this has been a 15-year plus problem in the making. Technologies can help address that, but really we need people who want to adopt them and who want to play and experiment, and the outcomes are uncertain. It's a bit ironic coming from me. I work for a government where this is essentially our job, where we have to proselytize to people to say, hey, we want to engage, but the outcomes are uncertain. There isn't always a well-defined ROI at the end of this, and we have to be able to look the 20, 30 plus years, and that costs money. Now, from a private investment perspective, those people will reap those rewards, but from government, there are some uncertainties there. But it's still critical for the city to play this role, and then also tell the story of why. Like, what is the benefit to the citizens? I think there's an education piece where the citizens get to see that they are the heroes in the story and they benefit. They're either reducing costs or there's potential for market opportunities, private or otherwise. But that story needs to be told, and that help needs to be told as to why they're involved. Because otherwise it's a taxpayer argument. What the heck are we paying for, and when do we get to benefit? So it's not always a 2, 5, a 10-year ROI, but that return is there. But by the time you want to play, actually, to the point of your earlier question, when is the best time to get involved? By the time you see everyone else getting involved and reaping the benefits, that's way too late. So.
I like what you said about knowing the why, and to your example about driving in a tricycle, I don't know if any of you went to school here in Calgary and went to Safety City. You did. So my daughters went to Safety City. It's basically where they take kindergarten kids, they bring them, they put them on a tricycle, and there's like a fake road network, and they're teaching them the rules of the road riding on tricycles. It's just south, it's at the bottom of Crowchild Trail somewhere, right? And kids go there to learn. And now again, these are 5 and 6 year old kids on tricycles learning the rules of the road. They're not going to be driving until hopefully, at least 9 or 10 years later, right? But it's important for them to be exposed to that environment early. So I think, Oba, to your point, and there's a different why. You're putting those kids in those tricycles in Safety City. Why? Not to learn how to drive a car, but there's other things they need to know. And I think similarly for industry adoption and things like that, it's really understanding, well, what are we actually trying to get out of this, right? And that's really the focus, because there's a long-term benefit to having that knowledge and awareness.
Excellent. Thank you all for your answers. We've got about 5 minutes left. Do you want me to keep going, or do we want to open it up?
Let's open it up.
Let's open it up. Who's got a question in the audience? Sandra.
As you're talking, just a flood of thoughts were coming into my head, and particularly about the discussion of the ideal quantum computer. What are we going to use it for? What are the use cases, the best cases, adoption? So now I'm thinking, because I typically reverse engineer, taking what it is that we want to solve, the problem, reverse engineering that, utilizing AI to develop that proposal, if you will, into its most difficult state in order for the quantum computer to solve. So what does an ideal quantum computer look like in our current structure of knowing, and where we want to go with it?
So I am aware that AI is used to help design quantum circuits for a future quantum computer. Is that kind of what you're talking about? How our current technologies can help plan and shape the future quantum technology, or?
Because there were several different points made. There were several different points made in the conversation. Well, what does the ideal quantum computer look like? What are we going to use it for? Does every business need to use it? And posing all these questions into a most difficult problem state for then the quantum computer to solve that problem or those sets of problems.
Right. Well, right now there's kind of a race going on, like which platform for a quantum computer is going to be the best, right? So is it with light? Is it with atoms? Is it with ions, superconducting circuits? Like there's like 15 different platforms, right? So we don't know yet which one's going to be better. We do try to use modeling to estimate, would this one work better than that one in certain circumstances, but it's still very unknown. Do you want to add?
Yeah. No, I'll just add a tiny bit and say that you've hit the nail on the head in a way, which is that a lot of what we're trying to do now is take hard problems that we want to solve and distill them down into something small and hard that we think is right for a quantum computer. That's a lot of what we're trying to do in research and in these experiments and in this, where we're trying to uncover these problems. So you're absolutely right. We use AI, we use human intelligence too. We sit down and talk a lot and try and figure something out. But yeah, that process of discovery you're talking about is very much happening and is important and is necessary to sort of take these problems and find their smallest, hardest elements that are right for a quantum computer. And I think we won't, we can do math, we can make predictions, but the best use cases, the best problems are going to be things that we discover by accident or through experiment once we have the machines.
I'll answer your question in the other way, which is we will never know what an ideal scenario looks like, because when you ask about any technology that we use today, at the advent of that technology, did we know what the ideal was, right? And I'll go back to this well-worn cell phone example, right? In that CBC piece, they were showing the big Motorola brick. That was their ideal. Like, that was the optimal at the time, but they were already talking about, hey, in the future, and it's in the news piece, it might be as small as your wristwatch, right? But they didn't know. And to answer your question, will all businesses need to use it? I think quantum as a technology, yes. The answer is easy, it's yes. But how it's going to be developed, I think you have to take more of a product development and product management perspective on it, which is which technology rises to the top will be determined on which problems need to be solved and the quickest and where value is generated, right? So I think for us, or for people who are on the cutting edge of the adoption curve, is really being open to having those conversations and doing the experiments. And if you think about every technology, there's been a lot of failures along the way, right? So the willingness to accept those failures, and I know for governments and municipal governments, that failure can be tough because you've got a taxpayer base that's not really tolerant for that. But how a center like this, like the WAVE Center, actually allows for that kind of experimentation so that you can move the needle and learn more about what the product development cycle looks like, I think will be really, really important. But I'm trying to not answer your question that way.
Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much to all of our panelists, all of the experts that we have here in the Calgary quantum ecosystem. Let's give them all a round of applause, please.